Good morning, learners. Today's lesson will be on different types of nationalism in South Africa. But then, before we move on, or before we dwell on today's topic, remember last time our last meeting was on nationalism as a whole, not specifically in South Africa. So today we're going to pay attention on different types of nationalism in South Africa, right? But then before we get on top of that, I want us to have a little bit of recapping on some of the things that we talked about on our last lesson, right? So it's just a little bit of a recap, right? So we started on the background and focus of nationalism, and then we moved on talking about on what exactly is nationalism. Okay, the concepts of nationalism. Remember when we talked about what nationalism is and what it means and where it originated, right? We talked about that. So now, before we move on, just so we can all be on a clear same page, so that is why I've decided that we start with an introduction on our topic of which is the lesson that we had the previous time. So, right, we firstly looked at the background and focus. So, the background and focus of nationalism. So, what did we talk about? We said the idea of nationalism, that people who speak the same language and have the same customs and tradition form one nation, right? So if we have a unique way of doing things, of which is customs and traditions, including ceremonies and so forth, you can name it. So if you're a nation, there are some certain specific things that as a nation you should be characterized accordingly with, like you fall under certain group just because you do this kind of customs and you follow certain traditions. So automatically that categorize you under a certain type of nation, right? So where did it originate? It originated in Europe, right? So before the 19th century, European people had no concept of being part of a nation. Instead, they were loyal to their own area and its leader, right? So if you remember clearly, what I said on our last lesson is that in Europe, they had what we call a monarchy, whereby there's only one leader. He takes the decision in the running of a country. People have no say in the running of the country. So that the majority act does not is actually not valid at this point. All right. Okay. For indigenous people in Africa, America and Asia, nationalism was simple, a form of self-defense, right? From self-defense from who? From the Europeans. Because if you get the history of nationalism, it's when it was a retaliation against the supremacy, white supremacy. Okay, right? People of the same tribe banded together to protect their territory from invasion by other tribes, right? So, for example, here in Africa, we had tribes, right? Before all this nationalism thing came about, we had tribes. We're minding our own business as African people, living our own way, right? So, when white people came about, that's when, like, as years went by, people started to get an enlightenment, and then they were like, no, let us fight against this system of being oppressed and then living under a palm of a minority. Okay, nationalism has played an important role in history as it is responsible for independence movement. So all those people who had nationalistic ideas, it was because they were fighting for independence. Like, no, listen, we want to rule ourselves. We're tired of being obeying other people's rules and opinions and stuff. Mind you, we as black peoples were taken as a white minority property. If you remember clearly, overseas, if I could draw one simple example of how black people came about in the United States specifically, It was during slavery, right? Black people were sold as slaves across the country, right? That's when you like the black, like the people of color, African Americans came about in America. They were sold. We have this one iconic person during slavery who was sold overseas in the United States, who is known as King Kunta. Kunta Kinte was an African king who was sold as a slave, right? He was sold to the United States, right? So what is nationalism? Nationalism is the idea that people who share a common history, right? We need to have same history for us to be a one nation. Language, we need to speak one language. Religion and tradition to form a nation who should rule themselves, right? So there won't be a contradictory if we have same custom, same religion, same tradition, performing same ritual. We're on the same page here, okay? Right? Nationalists believe that loyalty to their nation and culture is of the utmost importance, right? So what do you think could happen if you don't have love for your nation, right? It's what we see now happening, like in the contemporary society. Most of our people are westernized, right? So what the white minority did, they made sure that, okay, first of all, let us work on these people's self-esteem. We started not to like ourselves and then picture them as the most people who are worthy of living or worthy to serve. All right, okay. So in today's topic, what we're going to focus on, we're going to focus on the different types of nationalism in South Africa. Namely, we're going to start by the formation of the APO, right? African People's Organization, which was under the leadership of Dr. Abdurrahman. We're going to focus on the formation of the SAANC, which is the South African National Natives Congress, under the leadership of Pixley Ka-Isaka Seme. The influence of World War II, the Atlantic Charter, and AB's Tuma African claims, the returning of soldiers from the war, and the formation of the Youth League. Right. That's what we're going to focus on today's lesson. Right.